I decided to run for office in 2018 because I felt like we needed more science voices represented in government. Because when you have these decisions being made, especially decisions that do have some type of scientific basis underneath them, for example, COVID policy, who knew when I was running in 2018 that that would happen? But when you have these things that come up, it's good to have perspectives in the room that have some level of expertise.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming back. I'm Adam Parkameko. I'm super excited to have with me today Dr. Jasmine Clark from Georgia 13, who is not only an incredible Democrat with an incredible background, but you're going to hear more about sort of her rise and some big defeats that she laid to Republicans in the process, and where she's going from here. But first of all, thank you so much for your time and for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited about today's conversation.
And I can't say it enough. I'm so excited to have Democrats like you stepping up, who not only are in office but understand the importance of another area in which we need a lot of really good Democrats, especially in this sort of generational change that we're having right now. I'd like to kick this off with everyone watching your ad along with us, which I thought is amazing. So I'll play that.
Scientists analyze evidence. We seek truth. And the truth is, America is at a crossroads. Are we going to surrender to Trump and MAGA as they attack Georgia families? Or will we fight back? I'm Jasmine Clark, and I'm running for Congress to be the fighter Georgia needs. I stand on the shoulders of heroes who've broken barriers ahead of me and made it possible for me to break barriers of my own. My dad is a doctor. My mom is a nurse. I'm a professor of biology and a single mom who beat a Republican incumbent to serve you in the Georgia legislature. I ran to be a voice for science and truth in the face of Republican disinformation. And ever since, I've been taking on the toughest fights for Georgia families. I fought back against Governor Kemp and the MAGA Republicans attacking our abortion rights, our voting rights, and our health. And now I'm running for Congress to take that fight to Washington on behalf of Georgia families. I'll stand up to Trump and MAGA when they try to cut Medicare, destroy Georgia jobs, and gut medical research into cancer and Alzheimer's, and get to work building a stronger future for all of us, not just a powerful few. As a scientist, I seek truth. And the truth is, Georgia families need someone who shows up every day to fight for them and win. So join our campaign. There's not a moment to waste.
Okay, so I love this ad. I've seen it a bunch of times, and I have a bunch of different questions for you. But I also want to say that the idea of sending two Jasmines to Congress this cycle is very exciting for me. Can you talk a little bit about your background and the importance of, one, sort of the science piece of it, which I think we all incredibly appreciate and have come to maybe even take for granted with some of the stuff going on with RFK Jr. and others, but also your story and the way that you talk about being a single mom and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I am a mom. I have two children, one in college and one in high school. And my background is actually in microbiology. So, when you think of a politician, most people do not think science nerd. They don't think microscopes and lab coats. They, have this picture of maybe a lawyer or sometimes a business owner. But I decided to run for office in 2018 because I felt like we needed more science voices represented in government. Because when you have these decisions being made, especially decisions that do have some type of scientific basis underneath them, for example, COVID policy, who knew when I was running in 2018 that that would happen? But when you have these things that come up, it's good to have perspectives in the room that have some level of expertise. And this makes sense in so many other ways. If we have farm legislation, it's probably a good idea to have farmers in the room. If we have education legislation, it's actually probably a good idea to have some teachers in the room. And far too long, our government has not necessarily represented the voices of the community. And the science community is one that needs that voice. And so that's why I decided to run for office the first time. I'll admit, when I first decided to run, I was kind of like, what's a science girl like me doing in a place like this? And I wasn't quite sure how I would fit. But what I learned very quickly is that I don't mind reading bills. Apparently, a lot of my colleagues do, not all, but some do not like reading bills and do not read bills. Along with
Your
that,
future colleagues too. Some of them
yes,
have the same
yes,
problem.
they've admitted this just this year. But along with that, um, uh, I like to dissect, and pun intended, I like to dissect the bills. I like to actually know at a real level, get a real understanding of what we are voting on, how this is going to impact the people that will be impacted by the bill. Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Who wants it? Who doesn't want it? These are the types of things that I go through when I look at legislation. The same way when I was in the lab, we ask questions like, well, maybe the reason why we are seeing this is because of A, or maybe it's because of B. And what's another question or a way that we can approach getting to the end point or to answer the question that we want to answer? And so that's what I bring to legislating. I look at what's happening in our country now, cuts to CDC, cuts to higher education, cuts to cancer research and so many other research fields, cuts to environmental protections. And I really feel like we need a science voice in Congress speaking up for those things the same way I've spoken up for those things in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, and it's so important. I'm glad you brought up the COVID piece. I mean, that has affected so many of us in different ways. I used to visit family in Ukraine. That's where my father's from, and last time I was there was in 2019, and then the pandemic hit, and then the war hit. But I lost my mother's mother, her grandmother in England, who ended up getting an injury that had nothing to do with COVID, and she got COVID and passed away in the hospital because of COVID. And so it's so kind of refreshing to hear a candidate continue to talk about, not only the importance of remembering these things, but how they still impact everyone's lives. And one thing I found really interesting about you from the start was you know how to win. So when you decided to run, you ran in a district that Republicans held for over 20 years. I think there were a number of Republicans that held the seat. But in addition to that, the district was changed multiple times because obviously when someone like you comes along and wins that seat, they want it back. And can you tell us a little bit more about what happened there and the fact that you continue to hold that seat?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2018, I ran in this district that, by all intents and purposes, was a red district. And I met with a statistician because I'm a data girl. And I said, is there any possible way that I could possibly win in this seat? And when I met with them, they basically said, there are a lot of stars that need to align in order for you to win this seat, but it is not impossible. And that's all I needed to hear. If there is a possibility, if there is a pathway to victory, then I've got something to work with. So in 2018, we set out. We didn't raise a whole lot of money. I was a political newcomer. I didn't really understand things like fundraising and things like that. But we were able to win that seat with just 250 votes. Just 250 votes. You can imagine the Republicans in our state thinking to themselves, I don't know how she pulled it off, but she only won by 250 votes. We can get that seat back. And so they put a lot more effort into getting the seat back in the next election, which was 2020. But so did we. We put a lot of effort. We ran our campaign. We were one of the most competitive seats in the entire state of Georgia. And in that election, we won by 2,500 votes. Oh. And I think that was a moment where Republicans said, okay, She won in 2018. We didn't see her coming. She ran in 2020. It was a presidential year. We can still get this, but now we have redistricting as a tool to try to take the seat back. So they redrew the lines of the district to make it more red. It was still relatively purple, though. We still had an opportunity. We ran our race and we won again. And we won by more than anyone expected us to. And we even outperformed the top of the ticket, which is usually unheard of when you're thinking about a state legislative race. So, judge rules our maps unconstitutional, which then gives them another bite at the apple. And guess who ends up with a new district when they had to redraw the maps again? Yours truly. So in 2024, I had to run in a completely different district than I ran in 2022, which is a completely different district than I ran in 2020. And every single time we won by more than the last time.
That's
So
remarkable.
what it tells me is, one, when you have your boots on the ground, your ear to the community, and you are actually listening to people and showing up for people, Republicans can spend as much money as they want against you. It's not going to work because people know who you are for real. And that is what drives our people powered campaign. It's all grassroots. We don't take corporate PAC money or anything like that. We are just powered by people that say, I like the message that she brings. I like the science voice that she brings. And I want to see that represented in my government. And I'm hoping to see the same thing when we put our name on the ballot for Congress.
I love that. And, I've also, I didn't come up with the line, but I've said it for years and years ever since I heard it. I often think that Republicans don't win elections, Democrats lose them. And, we see here in Virginia this year, Republicans really don't knock on doors or anything like that. They're, a lot of their voters, they come out and they vote, and Democrats are knocking on every single door they can. And some of the period of time in which that you had to go through, your reelection was during a time which it was very difficult to knock on doors. So the fact that we were going through COVID and there weren't necessarily the resources that we needed to have folks safe and out there knocking on doors, and you continue to do what you're doing, I think speaks volumes to you. But it also reminds me of something Michelle Obama talked about for years, which is, whether it is a school board race or a state house race, if someone like you can bring out, just 1, 2, 3 more votes per precinct, what that does at the top of the ticket and throughout the state. And too often Democrats, they not Democrats in general, but a lot of times the national parties will put a lot of money into the top of the ticket and take a race like yours for granted. And I've always been a big advocate for, making sure we invest in these smaller races. But I think what's really interesting here, especially where the Senate, is a pivotal election. We've got folks like you running for Congress who have built the trust with voters in their community and can bring out those additional voters that someone like John Ossoff is going to need at a statewide level. So for that part, I'm really excited. Your story also reminds me a little bit of Josh Turek, who's running in Iowa right now. Ultimately, Joni Ernst decided she was not going to seek reelection. I think that's because Josh had a really great launch, but he and J.D. Scholten, I think, are two of the only Democrats that are elected in Western Iowa. And Josh is in a wheelchair, and he was out there going door to door, and almost none of these homes were accessible in his first race. So when you talk about the 250 votes that you won by, Josh won by 6 votes. And
Oh, wow.
a number of people would say to him, when he got to the door, how did you get up here? And he said he crawled up. But
Oh,
between you
wow.
and Josh and others, there's truly an incredible caliber of folks with not only backgrounds that are key and important to these issues, because as we saw with the kind of BS big beautiful bill, Republicans set this up in a way that a number of these things that are really truly going to hurt Americans from science and health standpoint and others aren't even going to take effect until after the election next year, so that they can go to their voters and say, hey, did that bill that Democrats, scared you about, did that affect you? And the reality is, the impact won't be felt for a very
Not
long
yet.
time.
Although,
And
can I
yeah,
point out
please.
something about that
Yeah,
though?
yeah.
While not while the actual bill does not get implemented, the prospect of the bill is impacting people's lives right now.
Right
So
away.
people are about to see their health insurance premiums go up. Whether you have private insurance, whether you're using exchange insurance, ACA insurance, those premiums are going up because the health insurance companies are anticipating, what's to come. And not just that, but here in Georgia, we just had a hospital in Livonia, Georgia, that is going to close down its labor and delivery ward, and the outpatient OBGYN that's associated with the hospital as well. And the nearest hospital now for people in that area to have a baby will be in Athens, Georgia, which is a 1 hour drive away. So while the impact isn't necessarily supposed to start until after the election, there are examples of it impacting people's lives. And I think it's incumbent upon Democrats to start talking about those things and remind people this is where this came from. This is how this happened. You're pregnant. You cannot deliver your baby without an hour drive. And what are the consequences of that in the state that already has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the entire, not just country, but the entire world? So these are all things that I think it's very important for us to talk about now, through this year and throughout the election. We have to make sure that people understand it's not just about who's going to get dropped from Medicaid next December. It's about all of these things that are happening all around us right now that we don't necessarily in our day-to-day lives, because we've got a lot of things going on, don't necessarily tie two and two together until someone ties it for us.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is so important, and the point you made on that bill is also so important. It's personal for everybody, and whether it's personal today or personal 10 years down the road, when it hits you, it hits you. I mean, we had with our most recent newborn 2.5 years ago, a life-threatening situation where we were lucky enough, just because we happen to live in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., to be close enough to Children's Hospital. And we basically had 6 hours after he was born to get him to that NICU, where they began to cool him and make sure that his blood was no longer at a toxic level, and if there was any injury to the brain that could potentially be off-skirted by the cooling, and then they started to warm him up again. And thankfully, if it wasn't for the fact that we were able to get him to Children's within that 6 hour period, he is healthy and has no issues today. But these rural hospitals, people are really starting to see it. And
Yes.
another thing that you mentioned, which I think maybe you're the second candidate this year I've heard mention it, is farmers. And the farming issue is huge too. And most folks don't realize there's a serious, not only are they, the dignity of their work is incredibly important to them, and they care about, sometimes, if they're even break even, they just are ecstatic that they're going to be able to keep that as another
Right.
generational farm and hand down to their kids. But there is a huge mental health crisis right now, and we're seeing a lot of them taking their own lives because they're doing the best they can do, and they're giving up. I think just maybe in the last 24 or 48 hours in Arkansas, two took their lives. So to hear you talking about farming and stuff, this is just not stuff that we hear from the other side. And I'll put the suicide hotline at the end of the show, just in case anyone needs it, because anytime we talk about this stuff, I like to put that out there. But it's
Right.
nice to hear someone like you bring these things up, because the importance of it and what we're starting to see really is taking its toll, not just on these things disappearing, but really, on our friends and neighbors who, at the end of the day, really just want to take care of their families and be able to not just provide and put that meal on their table, but be in a position to invite their neighbors over for dinner and, provide a meal for them as well.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. There's so many things that are happening in our country right now that are impacting so many people in ways they didn't even imagine it would. I'm sure when you hear the word tariffs, I'm sure that some of the farmers knew that was going to have an impact on their farm, but I don't know that many of them were braced for what our new immigration policies might do to their farms. I'm not sure that they were braced for what cuts to SNAP benefits might do to their farms. We live in an ecosystem. I keep going back to science words, but I think that it's a great way to communicate how things are working. Nothing is happening in a vacuum. And even when a person thinks, oh, this is only going to impact this person, or this is only going to impact those people, and I don't care about those people, they quickly find that we are so interconnected as a society, as communities, both in our states, in our country, and globally, that there is not a singular issue that will not somehow come back and impact you in some ways. And so our policies are impacting our economy. And again, you think, oh, well, they're just targeting, this group of people, and I'm not that group of people, so I shouldn't be worried, until it starts affecting your bottom line. And then you're like, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting that to happen. And so I think that's another reason why having this science perspective is very important in Congress, because I do think in ecosystems. I think about not just the trees and the animals, but the rocks and the dirt too, because all of it matters in an ecosystem. The same way in these bills and in these policies that we pass, all of it matters, even the teeny tiny details that people think you can write off.
Yeah, and I had a list of like 10 things. I'm going in a totally different direction because I love everything that you're saying. Georgia's a really interesting state, and one of the things that I've learned a lot more recently that I didn't realize is going back to sort of the farming issue, but tying it to science is the way there's so many things that come out of Georgia that don't stay in the U.S. that actually leave. And so when you're talking about tariffs, you guys have all sorts of things in there, whether it's pecans or timber,
Yeah.
and a lot of this
timber,
stuff is sent over to places that Republicans are constantly attacking, like China. And I think it's interesting too, because a lot of these farmers and others in rural areas that are having issues are oftentimes hit by storms, and Republicans have denied. You may have a pecan farmer somewhere in Northwest Georgia or another area or in your district that has what they did a year ago, and you may have another that no longer has anything because a storm took all those trees out. But I think it's interesting, even corn, right? A lot of times people don't realize that the corn that we're eating here is not necessarily from here. The corn that we have here, we're sending overseas for other things. So tying it to just sort of everything in your background, you're talking about stuff that normally you don't get to hear a candidate talk about. So I appreciate that, and all the more reason why I think people should step up and do anything they can to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we're all interconnected. And I know some people want to believe that they're not connected with the people that they have deemed not desirable in our society. But I promise you, all of us are interconnected, whether you want to believe it or not.
Can you tell people how they can support you? And we'll make sure that we put the link up here at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I would love if people could visit my website at Jasmine, like the flower, the number 4ga.com. And I've made it very easy for people. You can find me on pretty much every single social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, or X. And
you're going to be on Substack here too.
And TikTok. Yes. And you can even find me on Adam's show. But yes, all of those, Jasmine 4GA. That's it. At Jasmine.
We'll put it out there. And if you're in a position to make a contribution through Act Blue or become a sustaining donor that gives monthly. The other thing too, I always say to folks, even if you're not in a position, which I totally get nowadays with everything going on, to make a contribution, just sharing and retweeting her and reposting her means as much, because there might be somebody out there that's in a position to make a financial contribution, but also follow her and build her platform as well. So thank you so much. I hope we can do this more, and we need more people like you. So I'm excited to see you in Congress.
Thank you so much, Adam.